So I said, so let me get this straight. Do you have a big backyard? Yeah. Is there enough room in your backyard for an aircraft carrier? Do you have enough room back there for, a nuclear warhead? Because if you want to go mano a mano against Uncle Sam, I got to tell you, I'm going to put my money on Uncle Sam. And by the way, you've so twisted the Second Amendment that if you read this, the reason we were going to have a militia in the first place was because what? Being necessary for the security of a free state. The framers wrote the Second Amendment to say that you had a right to bear arms to defend the federal government. If the British land again, right, and they want payback, which they did in 1812. Not that you have the right to bear arms so you can overthrow the federal government.
You tell a good story about how your mom stressed to you always, the five of you, the importance of keeping your Spanish, maintaining your Spanish, right? And at the time, you're sort of fighting her thinking, I'm going to be a computer scientist. I don't need to know Spanish. And then years later, you're at Goldman Sachs and you get this great break because you know how to speak Spanish, and so mom's right again, right?
Oh, and how annoying.
That happens in my family. Believe me, it happens in a lot of our families.
The worst thing about this country at the moment, in this great and wonderful country, is that our dialogue is broken. We don't know how to communicate with each other. If you teach communications or you take a communications course, you get a whiff of how important it is to communicate. I think back in the caveman days, probably the three most important things were food, shelter, and communicate. And we don't know how to communicate. We don't talk to each other, husbands and wives, parents and kids. We talk over each other. When we're in class, we have our rebuttal ready to go even before we've heard the argument. We know what we disagree with before we've even heard it.
Why aren't they being realistic about the fact that our illegal immigration problem is actually shrinking?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is, as a friend of mine once told me, a demographer, he said, fear doesn't listen to facts. Fear doesn't listen to facts. But there's another point as well, and that is that whenever we talk about immigration, the folks in New York and Washington, and I work for media outlets in New York and Washington, but I live in California. And when they want to cover immigration, they'll send somebody down to the border. They used to send Larry King down to the border at CNN, or they'd send Lou Dobbs down to the border, or send whoever down to the border, as if that's where the immigration debate is. That's not where the immigration debate is. The immigration debate is happening about 500 miles inland in the middle of California at a Home Depot, at a restaurant, at a construction site or whatever. It's happening in the interior. It's not happening just on the border. So while we like to think of the immigration debate as really tied to what's happening on the border in terms of people coming across, it's really about the people who are already here. And so in that regard, and it's more impactful to them that there are 11 million people who are already here living in the interior than whether or not there's people coming across or not. And I would just say that we've seen it go in cycles where when the economy in Mexico is doing better than it is in the US, they'll stay in Mexico. When it gets better in the US, they'll come across again. So I've never been persuaded by this idea that somehow it's a non-issue because there's a trickle of people coming across the border now, because one, it changes, and two, because the debate's always been about the interior. We are and have always been one family, interdependent, locked in by circumstance, geography, and choice. And we're going to continue to go on and grow forward. This is much stronger a relationship than any one person can hurt or damage. We are at the tip of the spear in this region. We understand this better than anybody else. There's nobody else in the country that can say that they have as great a relationship as the San Diego Baja region does. And we're going to continue to build on it no matter who's president. I think that the right wing uses all these horrible hyperbolic phrases, and they're not right. And likewise, I think that when my friends on the left use the word fascist, they compare him to Hitler. They say he's a tyrant or a dictator or whatever. I think they're missing the point. You do have a president, though, who does not understand and will learn the hard way the fact that there are three branches of government and they were designed by smart men. The Constitution was written not by law professors for law professors, it was written by farmers for other farmers. It was written really cut and dried, but the farmers understood, the farmers and the framers understood that the three branches of government have to be equal. So the president, be he a Republican or a Democrat, they're always going to push back against the other two. There's a lot of countries in the world that don't have that kind of brilliant system where when the president says it, it happens and judges don't dare contradict him. the fact that a federal judge who can't be replaced or fired, has the guts to stand up to the president and say, you're wrong, you can't do this, the Constitution's on my side, that's terrific. And so I think you don't have to worry about him being a fascist. You do have to worry about him being an egomaniac. You do have to worry about him not understanding checks and balances. But guess what? He's a politician, and most of the politicians I've covered were egomaniacs who did not understand checks and balances.